Alright, so let's talk about joint pain. So in particular, when I talk about joint pain, I'm specifically going to talk about knee pain, hip pain, and lower back pain. Now, one thing I got to tell you is that if you have any kind of muscular imbalance, right, in the body, mobility issues and things like that, over time, these issues and imbalances are going to lead to knee pain, hip pain, or lower back pain, or all at the same time. If you have knee pain, ultimately what that turns into is hip pain, and ultimately lower back pain. Okay? And vice versa. If you have lower back pain, it translates to the hips and then to the knees and even to the ankles, right? So how do you fix these things? Well, there's 3 steps to it, right? There's massage, stretch, and strengthen. So massage can be applied by a professional, like a professional massage via shiatsu, deep tissue, hot stone, whatever the case is, right? All these different methods. Deep tissue is really like one of my favorites, right? To really get into the fascia, really dig in there and loosen things up, right? And then there is self-myofascial release, which is foam rolling, trigger point ball, and even using your hands, your fingertips, and dig it into a specific area of the body, right? A specific muscle, right? Where if I'm going to use my fingers, it's probably going to be on my forearms or, my subscapularis or, things like that. But I'll typically use a foam roller or a trigger point ball, which can be a lacrosse ball or a yoga ball, whatever the case is. And the point of that is you want to loosen up the fascia, right? And the muscle. Fascia is basically the casing that wraps around your muscle fibers and bundles the muscle together. It's what forms the shape of the muscle. I explained this in my foam rolling video. I have a foam rolling video, and I'll put a link to that in the description if you're watching this on YouTube. So there's that myofascial release, right? And this is the form that you'd use the most, right? If you're in the gym, especially training and things like that, you want to foam roll or do any kind of myofascial release before and after your workout, right? So you loosen up the body, right? Get some blood flow into the muscle and everything, loosen up that fascia and whatnot. And that's going to really help to open up and loosen up the muscle and get a little bit better movement within that muscle or muscle group. Now, moving on to stretching. Now, my favorite types of stretching are active isolated stretching, or AIS, right? And then there is dynamic stretching, where dynamic stretching, you move through a series of movements. Now, a lot of my movement culture videos and stuff, you'll see that stuff in there, right? And I got things like, they kind of resemble like yoga movements and stuff like that. And going back to active isolated stretching, right? That's basically where you do a stretch and you move through the stretch back and forth, right? You move into the stretch, you hold it for 2 to 3 seconds, and you come back. And then you go a little bit further, 2-3 seconds, and then come back, right? And you repeat that for like sets and reps, right? Kind of like how you do at a workout where you're doing 3 sets of 10 or whatever the case is. You do the active isolated stretching that way. Now with the dynamic stretching, right, it's more like moving yoga. It's like a flow back and forth through a series of movements, right, where you're lengthening certain muscles and shortening others, right? And you're always moving. And I feel like this even works from my experience, right, as a coach. People do really well with this, even more so than static stretching, where you're holding a stretch, right, and you're just holding it, keeping that constant tension on there. The reason why I don't really think that that's the best form of stretching is because if there's a lot of tension in the body and you can't really relax and breathe and all of that, and it's too much, what happens is your nervous system tightens up, right? Contracts the muscle, right? It fights. Your body fights you on the stretch. But when you're moving fluidly, taking your time through a certain range of motion, this helps the body to relax, right? And actually work with the stretch instead of working against yourself. So then there's that, right? And then actually there's the strengthening portion, which basically you're either going to be doing compound movements or doing isolation exercises. So people's imbalances they'll have weak hamstrings, weak glutes, right? Tight calves, tight quadriceps, right? So you'll have tightness in one muscle and then the opposing muscle will be weak. So if you have really tight quads, you end up having really weak hamstrings. And if you have weak hamstrings, obviously you have tight hamstrings and so on. Or if you have tight hamstrings, more than likely they're going to be weak. So really, to fix these imbalances, you want to strengthen the weak muscles while increasing the range of motion of the others, right? So if you have really tight hip flexors where you can't fully extend at the hip, it's going to be very hard to work the glutes and contract the glutes, which is why you want to focus on lengthening your hip flexors, right? Stretching out those hip flexors to reach a full range of motion and hip extension, and then you can start really contracting and working those glutes, isolating those glutes. So massage and stretch your quads, your hip flexors, right? Your hamstrings, right? And your quad, your gastrocnemius and your soleus, right? All those muscles in your calves. Because believe it or not, you end up having tight hamstrings because your gastrocs are tight, right? The gastrocnemius, which is that ball muscle that sits right below the knee, right? So you have your gastrocnemius, and then that ties into your hamstrings. If your gastrocnemius is tight enough, that's going to pull on your hamstrings, and things are going to be really tight behind the knee. Right, so if you have tight hamstrings and you stretch, right, and try to touch your toes and you feel the most tension behind your knees, chances are your ankles are really tight, your gastrocnemius is really tight. So you really want to focus on flexing, right, the ankle joint, right, and extending the knee joint, really stretching out the soleus and the gastrocnemius, and then start stretching the hamstrings and things like that. And when you have more range of motion in the hamstrings, that will allow you to work your glutes even more, right? That glute maximus and so on. It'll allow you to do that even more. So now, most people are quad dominant, right? Your quadriceps do all the work. This is why when people squat and stuff, they mainly feel it in the quadriceps and the knees, right? If you have weak glutes, and overactive quads, you're going to have a lot of excess tension on the quadriceps, and thus that excess tension is going to go into the knees, right? And really pull on those knees and irritate those knees and cause inflammation. Now, when you start squatting and things like that and your glutes get strong, it takes the pressure and the strain off the quadriceps and the knees, right? Now you're more balanced. So isolation exercises can be anything from a hamstring curl to a leg curl or a hip bridge, right? So those are the isolation exercises, right? Hip bridge, you could lie flat on your back, push your hips up to the ceiling, right? I have videos where I do that as well. And then hamstring curls, leg curls, which you can find any apparatus in the gym to do that, right? It's basically just a leg curl. You just flex the knee. Yeah, so what else do I want to add to that? Strengthening, right? Now, the thing about the compound movements, the compound exercises like squats and deadlifts, lunges and things like that, these exercises are to build a balanced musculature, right? When you have a really good squat, you can squat all the way down into the bottom position of a squat, right? Like a toddler. When your gastrocs are loose and your soleus is loose, or you got that ankle mobility, you can sit in that bottom position comfortably. When your hamstrings are loosened up, right, you can have more of like that anterior pelvic tilt to push the butt back and keep your chest up and all that type of stuff, right? And when you stand up, you're going to really fire those hamstrings and those glutes and those quadriceps synergistically without one muscle just overly dominating all the rest. So now when you have those really strong leg muscles, that's going to take tension off your lumbar spine, right? Because if you got weak glutes, that's going to affect the knees and it's going to travel up to the lumbar spine. And being that there's no tension on the glutes because they're not active, the tension is going to go on the hip, the lumbar spine and the knees, right? So there's that, right? Identify what muscles are not really firing. If you're squatting and you're feeling all quads, you need to work on your hamstrings and your glutes. If you bend down, you can't touch your toes, you need to work on that hamstring flexibility, and you need to work on the ankle mobility, right? Stretching out the gastrocnemius and the soleus, all right, which is the muscles in the calves. And that's it. It's very easy. If you can't come down to a half kneeling position or a full kneeling position and extend your hips all the way, you need to loosen up your quads and your hip flexors. I'll do a video in the future kind of demonstrating this, what you can do to loosen these things up and identify these problems. That's pretty much it. If you want to know more in detail, you're really struggling to get some gains in the gym and stuff like that, and you're looking for a coach to help you with these things, let me know. right? I got a physical therapy background. I have 10 plus years of coaching. I'll be more than happy to, do a web chat and work with you to come up with a strategy and give you a program that you can follow in the gym. So if you're interested in that, drop me a comment, reach out to me, email me, connect with me on social media, etc. Right? Tribe by Noire. And having said that, grow mind, body, and soul. Peace out, y'all.